The true nature of low self-esteem and inferiority complex. A Grail clarified understanding. Preface. The need for clarity in an age of confusion. Humanity today stands in an age of unprecedented information, yet unprecedented confusion. People know more facts, collect more data, and consume more opinions than at any point in history, yet they understand less about themselves. Amid this swirl of information, many suffer quietly from something deeper than mental confusion, a crippling uncertainty about their own worth. Low self-esteem and inferiority complex have become so widespread that they now appear normal. Entire generations are growing up convinced that they are not enough, not capable enough, not worthy enough, not beautiful enough, not intelligent enough, not spiritual enough. Modern society calls it psychological distress, identity crisis, or self-image issues, but the Grail Message reveals it is something far more profound. A radiational disorder within the human soul. For true human value does not arise from the opinions of others, from achievements, titles, or material possessions. It arises from the inner harmony of the spirit with the laws of creation. When this harmony is disturbed, a person sinks not only emotionally but spiritually. Their radiations dim, their courage wanes, and their life becomes increasingly influenced by fear, comparison, doubt, and self-rejection. Yet humanity has been conditioned to misinterpret this inner disturbance. Some assume low self-esteem as humility. Others believe inferiority is virtue. Many imagine that degrading oneself is righteous. Millions are bound by cultural, religious, and psychological misconceptions that rob them of spiritual strength. It is time to bring clarity. It is time to differentiate truth from error. It is time to shine the light of the Grail Message upon this darkened area of human experience. For when the light touches a thing, confusion dissolves, error burns away, and the truth stands revealed in simplicity and purity. This book is written for 4 kinds of people. Those who silently suffer from feelings of inferiority and long to be free. Those who have misunderstood self-worth and seek clarity that resonates with truth. Those who truly wish to help others rise from the grip of insecurity and self-rejection. Those who wish to understand human radiations and how inner attitudes shape destiny. It is not a psychological exposition. It is not a motivational manual. It is not a cultural critique. It is a spiritual clarification. Its goal is to help the reader understand the radiational laws governing self-worth, dignity, shame, courage, confidence, and the state of the soul. Its purpose is to lead the earnest seeker back to the natural radiance that every human spirit is meant to carry, without arrogance, without inferiority, without distortion. Humanity can only rise when each person rises within. And no one can rise without recognizing the truth about themselves. May this book serve as a guide, a light, and a corrective mirror for all who sincerely seek to rediscover their true value before the light. Introduction. Why humanity misunderstands low self-esteem, and why this book must correct it. If a person today says, "I have low self-esteem," they may receive sympathy, advice, psychological terminology, or moral instruction. Yet very few stop to ask, what exactly is self-esteem? What is its spiritual source? And how does it become damaged? Humanity misunderstands low self-esteem because it evaluates it only intellectually, emotionally, or socially. The world sees it as a psychological weakness, a personality trait, a product of upbringing, or a result of social comparison. But the Grail Message lifts the veil. It shows that the feeling of inferiority is not primarily a mental issue or emotional disorder, it is a disturbance in the radiational balance of the human soul. Every thought, every desire, every fear, every doubt radiates. These radiations attract corresponding experiences, form inner conditions, and shape outer circumstances. Thus, low self-esteem is not merely a feeling. It is an inner spiritual dissonance, a vibration that draws weakness, confusion, and failure toward the individual. This misunderstanding has led humanity into several dangerous errors. Error 1. Confusing inferiority with humility. The world has told people that to be humble is to think less of themselves. This error has destroyed many souls. True humility is the recognition of one's place in creation, inferiority is the denial of one's value. Error 2. Believing self-esteem comes from achievements. People build their entire sense of worth on external conditions, grades, appearance, success, money, approval, social validation. But when these collapse, their identity collapses with them. Error 3. Treating low self-esteem as a minor issue. In truth, it is a profound radiational sickness. It affects destiny. It attracts failure. It weakens intuition. It blinds conscience. It makes the human spirit unable to act decisively. Error 4. Believing one's worth depends on the opinions of others. Here lies one of the greatest chains binding humanity. People fear rejection, fear disapproval, fear judgment, so they shrink, suppress themselves, pretend, and live below their true capacity. Error 5. Trying to fix low self-esteem through flattery and slogans. The world says, "You're enough. You're perfect as you are. You can do anything." These affirmations soothe for a moment but have no power. They contradict the law of reality, the law of movement, and the law of spiritual maturity. True self-esteem does not come from hyper self-flattery, it comes from alignment with truth, uprightness, and conscious obedience to creation's laws. Why this book must correct these errors. Humanity is entering a time of purification. Everything false must fall away, whether beliefs, habits, emotions, or self-images. Those who cling to distorted ideas of self-worth will suffer deeply, for the light intensifies everything planted in the soul. This book exists to correct the false idea that inferiority is humility, expose the spiritual dangers of low self-worth, restore the true understanding of human dignity, show how the laws of creation shape self-image, lead the earnest reader toward inner freedom and radiational strength. Your worth does not depend on another person's opinion. Your dignity does not come from your achievements. Your identity does not arise from your upbringing. It comes from your spiritual origin, from the spark of the human spirit that must unfold according to the will of the Creator. Inferiority and low self-esteem suffocate this spark, preventing it from radiating, acting, and developing. This book is a corrective guide. Not to inflate the ego. Not to encourage pride. But to lead the reader to the natural self-worth intended by the Creator, clear, calm, upright, humble, confident, and free. Where inferiority collapses, truth stands upright. Where low self-esteem shrinks, clarity expands. Where fear dominates, obedience to the light liberates. This is the journey that begins now. Part 1. The nature of self-esteem and the human soul. Understanding self-worth through the light of truth. Chapter 1. What is self-esteem? A radiational understanding. Humanity speaks of self-esteem as a psychological state, a mental posture, or an emotional condition. Yet in the light of truth, self-esteem is not primarily an emotion, nor a construct of the intellect. It is a radiational condition of the human spirit, a vibrational state arising from one's alignment with the laws of creation. Self-esteem is the soul's natural sense of its own value as a creature of the Creator. It is not given by parents, teachers, society, or achievements. It is woven into the very fabric of the human spirit. It is the quiet, steady radiance that comes when a soul stands upright, truthful, and connected to the will of the light. In its pure form, self-esteem is not pride. It is not boastfulness. It is not the loud confidence of one who wishes to be seen. Instead, it is inner certainty, the calm knowing that one is part of something greater, and that one's existence has purpose and meaning. When a human being is inwardly aligned, when thoughts, words, deeds, and intuition flow harmoniously, self-esteem radiates naturally. When a person acts against their inner conviction, or when they violate the laws of spiritual movement, self-esteem weakens. The radiance flickers, becomes clouded, or collapses entirely. Thus, self-esteem is not merely how you feel about yourself. It is the spiritual condition of your soul's luminosity. To understand this fully, one must recognize that everything in creation gives off radiations, thoughts, words, emotions, intentions. Low self-esteem arises when the human spirit emits weak, distorted, or fragmented radiations. True self-esteem arises when the spirit emits clear, luminous, harmonious radiations that correspond with the will of God. Therefore, the journey toward healthy self-esteem is not a psychological exercise, it is a spiritual purification. Chapter 2. The Spiritual Origin of Human Self-Value. Every human spirit originates from regions of light where purity, clarity, and harmony prevail. In those heights, the value of a being is not something to be questioned, it is inherent. Each spirit, in its primordial form, knows itself as a purposeful, radiant entity. This original consciousness still lives within every human being, though buried under layers of earth-bound impressions, wrong thinking, and misguided experiences. True self-value arises from this eternal root. What then causes human beings to doubt their worth? The descent of the spirit into the material worlds involves forgetting, just as a seed buried in the soil no longer sees the sun. The seed must awaken, grow upward, and rediscover its source of nourishment. Low self-esteem arises when the spirit fails to reconnect with its inner light, identifies only with the intellect, body, or social identity, separates itself from the laws that sustain its growth. Human beings who measure themselves by earthly standards, income, appearance, social status, recognition, cut themselves off from their spiritual origin. They try to replace inner certainty with outer validation. But nothing external can restore what only the light can ignite. Self-value is spiritual, it is the soul's memory of its radiant origin. The more purely a person lives, the more they sense their inherent worth. The more they follow their intuition, serve the good, and act uprightly, the more this inner worth shines. A human being who lives rightly does not need praise, applause, or admiration. They glow from within. Their worth is anchored in the light, not in worldly mirrors. Chapter 3. The Difference Between Genuine Humility and Inferiority. One of humanity's gravest errors is the confusion between humility and inferiority. Humility is strength. Inferiority is weakness. Humility arises from clarity. Inferiority arises from distortion. Humility elevates the soul. Inferiority diminishes it. Genuine humility is the quiet acknowledgement of one's place in creation. It is the recognition that all abilities come from the Creator, and that one must use them in service. The humble person stands upright, confident, and purposeful. They walk in truth without need for praise or fear of judgment. Inferiority, however, is a collapse of the inner self. It is the soul's withdrawal in fear, confusion, or self-rejection. Inferiority does not arise from truth, it arises from distorted perception. While humility acknowledges the greatness of the Creator, inferiority denies the value of the creature. Inferiority says, "I am nothing. I have no worth. Others are better than me." Humility says, "I am a servant of the light. Everything I am comes from Him. Let me use my abilities faithfully." Inferiority shrinks, humility expands. Inferiority paralyzes, humility empowers. Inferiority poisons the radiations, humility purifies them. The Grail Message warns that the human spirit must never belittle itself. It must stand firm, clear, and ready. Inferiority is a sin against one's own spirit, an insult to the Creator who placed within each being the ability to grow, to serve, and to radiate. To reject oneself is to reject the gift of life. True humility is light, inferiority is shadow. Chapter 4. The Soul's Measure versus the World's Measure. The world measures human worth through appearance, wealth, status, education, influence, popularity. These are illusions, earthly shadows that vanish with time. None of them reflect the value of the spirit. Creation measures human worth differently. In the light, a being is measured by purity of will, clarity of thought, truthfulness, diligence, love of service, obedience to the laws, ability to radiate blessing. A poor man who is upright stands higher than a wealthy man who is deceitful. A simple woman who lives truthfully stands above an educated woman who lives in vanity. A child who is pure within outradiates an adult whose inner life is darkened. The true measure of a human being is invisible to physical eyes. When people accept the world's false measure, they weaken their radiations. They tie their self-worth to the shifting opinions of others. They bend their soul to earthly illusions. Thus inferiority grows, because the world can never provide stable worth. Only the light gives value that does not change. To regain true self-esteem, one must abandon the world's scale and step onto the scale of truth. There, one finds that real worth never depended on earthly attributes. It depended solely on spiritual alignment. Chapter 5. How early experiences affect radiational self-perception. Childhood is the period when the soul's radiations are most malleable, open, and receptive. Every word, tone, atmosphere, and gesture from parents, teachers, and caregivers leaves an imprint, either strengthening or weakening the child's luminous core. When a child is criticized without guidance, compared harshly, ignored, belittled, or raised in an environment of fear, the soul contracts. Its radiations become hesitant, dimmed, or distorted. The child interprets these experiences as reflections of inner worth. The young spirit, still learning to express itself, internalizes the energies around it. But early experiences do not determine destiny. They only shape the initial radiational posture. The spirit can rise far above them once it awakens, recognizes the distortions, and aligns with truth. Adults must realize, low self-esteem does not come from childhood alone. It arises because the spirit chooses to hold on to the scars instead of rising above them. The human being must learn to recognize what was false, reject it, and reconnect with the radiations of purity and truth. Every spirit has the capacity to cleanse early impressions. The light constantly offers renewal. What a child absorbed unconsciously, the adult can correct consciously. Part 2. The roots of low self-esteem. Tracing the hidden causes of inferiority. Chapter 6. The inner causes of inferiority complex. Inferiority does not begin from the outside, even though the outside often triggers it. It begins within the human radiations, in the internal posture of the soul toward itself. In the light of the Grail Message, every human being enters Earth with a unique radiational imprint, a signature of purpose, capacity, and inner worth. This inner worth is not given by parents, society, achievements, or human approval. It flows from the spirit and exists before earthly birth. Yet, many people live disconnected from this inner reality. Inferiority arises exactly at the point where the human spirit stops listening to the inner voice, allows the intellect to dominate, accepts the evaluations of other human beings as truth, doubts its own worth, and begins comparing itself with others. It is a distortion created when the spirit bows before the intellect, which was meant to serve, not rule. The intellect only measures by external forms, social impressions, earthly standards. It cannot perceive the radiant value of the spirit. Thus, inferiority is essentially self-estrangement. The soul has turned away from its own core. Whenever the human being fails to anchor in the light-given value within, the vacuum created will naturally attract insecurity, anxiety, timidity, self-doubt, and dependence on external validation. This radiational weakness draws more weakness to itself, forming the inferior complex, a cycle of shrinking inwardly, doubting oneself, and expecting disapproval. The way out begins not by building confidence, but by restoring connection to the spiritual core, where dignity flows naturally, without effort. Chapter 7. Fear and doubt as radiational blockages. Fear and doubt are not merely emotions, they are forces, radiational distortions that stand between the human being and his natural expression. Every spirit is meant to radiate brightly. When it does, clarity, confidence, and healthy self-worth flow effortlessly. But fear casts a shadow over these radiations. It binds the soul, tightens its movement, interrupts its connection to the living laws. The person then loses the ability to judge himself clearly. Doubt follows, like fog over a landscape. Fear whispers, "You are not enough." Doubt adds, "You will fail." Shame concludes, "You should hide." Thus begins the collapse of self-esteem. In Grail understanding, fear is the consequence of separation from the light. Doubt is the sign of spiritual inactivity. Both block the inflow of power from above. Once this inflow is blocked, the person can no longer perceive his real value. He becomes dependent on external signs, praise, attention, visibility, possessions, to be reassured. Yet none of these can repair the blockade. Only an awakening of the will toward the light, through truthfulness, prayerful openness, and courageous decisions, breaks the chains of fear. The soul regains confidence not by force, but by alignment. When the light flows freely again, the soul naturally expands, and inferiority dissolves like mist before the sun. Chapter 8. Comparison and Envy, the Thief of Self-Worth. Comparison is not a harmless habit. It is one of the greatest destroyers of inner peace and spiritual balance. In creation, no two spirits are identical, and therefore no two paths, talents, or missions can ever be compared without distortion. Each human being is a unique combination of radiations, and stands in creation as a singular expression of God's will. To compare yourself with another is spiritually absurd, like comparing sunlight with moonlight, or a mountain with a river. Each has its place. Yet comparison has become the foundation of human self-assessment. People measure beauty against beauty, success against success, intelligence against intelligence, possessions against possessions, and spiritual worth against external achievements. This false measurement produces inferiority in some and arrogance in others, both distortions. Where comparison enters, envy soon follows. Envy is not simply wanting what another has. It is resentment toward your own path. It tells the soul, your life is wrong. Someone else's life is right. Envy darkens the radiations, and dark radiations cannot attract strength, clarity, or confidence from above. Instead, they draw more dissatisfaction and inner unrest. The cure is to recognize your value is not in what you achieve but in what you are, a spirit created to unfold its unique purpose. Once this becomes living conviction, comparison loses its power, envy dissolves, and self-esteem is restored to its rightful spiritual foundation. Chapter 9. Misuse of Imagination and Thinking Power. Imagination is a powerful spiritual tool, meant to receive impressions from the higher realms and translate them into earthly forms, ideas, solutions, creations. But in most people today, imagination has been hijacked by fear and self-doubt. Instead of envisioning possibilities, they imagine failure, rejection, inadequacy, embarrassment, or worst-case scenarios. Thinking power, which should serve the spirit, becomes a tormentor. The person builds images of inferiority within, and these images become radiational realities. In the Grail understanding, thought forms are not symbolic, they are actual forms in the fine material realm. When a person repeatedly imagines himself weak, unwanted, unworthy, or incapable, he creates these forms around himself. They darken his aura and suffocate his natural radiance. Others perceive this heaviness, respond to it, and the individual's negative beliefs appear confirmed. Thus, inferiority becomes a self-created cage. The way out is to cleanse the inner field by consciously forming truth-aligned thought forms. Images of strength, clarity, dignity, uprightness, and noble purpose. These are not affirmations. They are spiritual constructions, aligned with what is already true in the spirit. Once the inner atmosphere changes, the human being naturally grows into confidence, not artificially, but organically. Chapter 10. Internalizing Criticism, when judgment becomes a cage. Criticism becomes harmful only when the individual accepts it as identity. Words spoken by parents, teachers, peers, or society become internal voices. These voices, repeated long enough, embed themselves into the soul's radiations. The child who hears, "You can't do anything right." The adult who hears, "You are not enough." The spouse who hears, "You are a failure." The employee who hears, "You will never measure up," may eventually believe these statements, even when they contradict the truth of the spirit. The tragedy is not in the criticism, but in the internalization of it. Once accepted, such judgments become a constant background noise. They drain spiritual strength, distort self-perception, and lower the person's vibrational field. This creates a self-fulfilling spiral. They believe they are inadequate. They act uncertainly. Others respond accordingly. This response reinforces the belief. The cage tightens. In the Grail Message, every human being is urged to examine every thought and feeling in the clear light of truth. Only what resonates with the inner core should be kept, everything else must be discarded. The soul heals the moment it rejects every judgment that contradicts its God-given worth. The human being must rise to the knowledge. I am not what others said I am. I am what I was created to be. The cage opens. The spirit stretches. The radiations brighten. Self-esteem returns, not as pride, but as truth. Part 3. Societal and Cultural Influences. How outer environments shape, distort, or strengthen inner self-worth. Chapter 11. How family dynamics create self-doubt. Family is the first radiational environment into which the young human spirit incarnates. In this tender stage, the soul is extremely impressionable, absorbing impressions not through intellect but through radiation, tone, atmosphere, emotional climate, and the spiritual condition of parents and caregivers. The spiritual sensitivity of the growing human being. A child does not evaluate itself intellectually, it feels itself. And what it feels is shaped largely by the radiations that surround it. A harsh, critical environment causes the child to doubt its natural worth. A cold or emotionally distant atmosphere makes it feel invisible. A controlling or overprotective parenting style may suppress confidence and initiative. Constant comparison between siblings inflicts radiational wounds that may take decades to heal. Where warmth, clarity, justice, and loving firmness radiate, the child's own inner worth begins to unfold harmoniously. But when dissonance governs the home, the child unconsciously adopts the atmosphere as its self-image. Wounding statements that shape inner vibrations. Phrases like, "You never do anything right. You are not like your brother, sister. You always fail. This is why no one likes you," create deep radiational scars because they strike at the core of the child's spiritual self-perception. These words, carried by the emotional force behind them, form thought forms around the child, limiting movement, courage, and trust in its inner abilities. Parents as radiational mirrors. In truth, the child is often not responding to its own deficiency but to the distorted radiations of the adults. Many parents project their unresolved fears, failures, frustrations, and complexes onto their children. Because the child cannot separate its essence from the parental projection, it internalizes the distortion as reality. The path of correction. True healing begins when one recognizes that many feelings of inferiority were borrowed, not born from one's essence. The parental environment shaped the early radiational image. The light demands a return to the original, unburdened spiritual identity. The Grail Message calls each human being to examine inherited inner pictures and separate them from truth. Only then can the spirit rise above early distortions and reclaim its innate dignity. Chapter 12. Education, Social Norms, and Imposed Inferiority. Society is structured in ways that often reward conformity while punishing individuality. This creates a powerful field of pressure that shapes human self-worth long before maturity. Education. Developing intellect but wounding the spirit. Modern systems prioritize competition over genuine ability, comparison over personal growth, intellectual performance over spiritual development. A child whose gifts lie outside the narrow academic parameters is quickly branded slow, weak, unserious, less intelligent. Yet many of the greatest spiritual, creative, and technical gifts do not shine under standardized tests. The soul contracts under such misjudgment, believing itself deficient where it is only different. Social norms that dictate value. Human society creates artificial standards of worth. Wealth equals superiority. Physical beauty equals importance. Titles equal intelligence. Popularity equals relevance. These norms poison the radiational environment. Instead of leading the human being toward inner unfolding, they pressure it into roles, masks, and false identities. What does not fit the mold is subtly made to feel inferior. Culture is a radiational force. Culture can uplift or degrade. When culture celebrates superficial achievement, outward appearance, material advantage, it creates an atmosphere in which souls measure themselves by external, earthly standards, thereby rejecting the inner guidance of the spirit. Inferiority flourishes wherever outward appearance overshadows inner essence. Correcting societal distortions. The Grail Message teaches. In the light of truth, Every human spirit has a unique path, unique abilities, and unique tasks within creation. Thus, the soul must free itself from societal scales of measurement and rediscover its value not in conformity but in authentic, purposeful living. Chapter 13. Religion, Dogma, and the Misuse of Humility. One of the greatest contributors to low self-esteem has been religion, not in its pure form, but in its distorted earthly interpretations. False humility is a spiritual burden. Many doctrines have equated being humble with belittling oneself, denying one's gifts, suppressing one's abilities, accepting mistreatment, calling oneself unworthy, nothing, or a worm. These ideas are utterly foreign to the will of God. True humility is clarity, not degradation. It is recognition of one's place in creation, not spiritual self-erasure. How religious misuse of humility damages self-worth. When people are taught, you are worthless without the approval of the institution. You must suppress yourself to be spiritual. All your impulses are sinful. They begin to distrust their inner life. The result is a split within the soul, a mistrust of one's own radiational intuition. Inferiority grows wherever genuine spiritual abilities are condemned or restrained. The Grail Message restores dignity. It teaches that every human spirit is a noble creation, endowed with gifts to serve and uplift, designed to unfold, not shrink, under the light, expected to stand upright before the Creator. Humility is the willingness to serve within the laws, not the command to make oneself small. Undoing religiously induced inferiority. Healing begins when one recognizes the difference between humility and humiliation, the difference between reverence and self-belittlement, the difference between obedience to God and subjugation to human doctrine. The spirit stands tall when it recognizes its origin, not in earthy dust, but in the will of the Most High. Chapter 14. Media and the Illusion of Perfection. Modern media projects false images of success, beauty, popularity, and relevance. These images are not just visual, they carry radiations that enter the soul of the viewer. Media magnifies inadequacy. Through constant exposure to curated lifestyles, edited appearances, artificial success stories, exaggerated achievements, the individual gradually believes that everyone else is living more fully, more successfully, more beautifully. The soul begins to shrink inward. Comparison intensifies through artificial imagery. The human being forgets that nothing online is a complete truth. Images are crafted for effect, not reality. Many influencers portray illusions, not authentic lives. But radiations do not care whether the image is real or fake. They affect the soul regardless. The spirit feels inadequate because it absorbs a constant stream of perfected illusions. The media-induced break from reality. This leads to dissatisfaction with one's physical appearance, undervaluing one's talents, feeling behind in life, constant comparison with illusions, loss of inner peace and grounding. The Grail Message's antidote. The light demands authenticity. What is false cannot nourish the spirit. True self-worth arises only when the soul breaks free from imitation and returns to its unique path, abilities, and tasks. Chapter 15. Peer pressure and the radiational infection of insecurity. Peer groups, friends, classmates, colleagues, social circles, create powerful radiational currents. These currents can uplift or destroy. Radiational influence among peers. Every group has a dominant tone, a radiational signature, an atmosphere of expectation. If the group values superficiality, bravado, material display, or aggressive self-presentation, then quiet, thoughtful, spiritually oriented individuals may feel inferior simply because they do not match the group's vibration. This is not inferiority, it is radiational misalignment. The danger of seeking approval. The desire to be accepted leads many to hide their true nature, suppress their gifts, imitate others, betray their inner calling, shrink their spiritual radiations to fit in. But what shrinks under pressure cannot shine in freedom. The spirit becomes smaller, not by nature, but by choice. Insecurity is contagious. Just as fear spreads, so does insecurity. The human being absorbs the radiations of those around it. When surrounded by anxious people, boastful people, critical people, competitive people, the soul gradually loses its natural steadiness. The Grail Message teaches that every interaction is an exchange of radiations. One cannot remain unaffected. The path of liberation. True spiritual self-worth emerges when one chooses uplifting associations, relationships rooted in clarity, friends who encourage growth, environments aligned with one's spiritual direction. The spirit blossoms where its radiations are allowed to unfold without distortion. Part 4. Consequences of low self-esteem. How the inner darkness of self-rejection obstructs spiritual growth and earthly fulfillment. Chapter 16. Emotional paralysis and indecision. Low self-esteem does not begin outwardly, it begins as a radiational weakening within the soul. When a human being no longer perceives his own value in creation, the inner spiritual threads that connect him to clarity, courage, and decisiveness become slack and faint. This condition manifests outwardly as emotional paralysis, the inability to move, decide, or take a step forward even when the path is clear. In the light of the Grail Message, we understand that indecision is not merely a psychological struggle but a spiritual stagnation, a consequence of disrupted inner movement. Every decision requires a spark of will. But the human will can only ignite when the soul feels anchored in its worth. When the soul feels small, insignificant, or unworthy, the will weakens, and the person hesitates, doubts, and postpones until life's opportunities pass by. Emotional paralysis is therefore the outward expression of a deeper inner cry. I do not trust myself because I do not know myself. The more a person doubts his value, the more foreign even simple decisions feel. The intellect then takes over, generating countless what-ifs, which further suffocate the intuitive voice. The cure is not found in psychological forcing or motivational hype, but in restoring radiational harmony. When a person reconnects with the truth of who he is, a spiritual being endowed with light-originated dignity, movement returns naturally. The soul straightens, the will awakens, decisions become effortless again. Indecision dies the moment a person stands in the truth of his own worth. Chapter 17. The connection between low self-worth and spiritual blockage. Low self-esteem is not a harmless emotional discomfort. In radiational reality, it is a blockage, an obstruction within the spiritual organism. The Grail Message teaches that every human being is meant to be a channel through which the radiations of the light flow outward into creation, into deeds, choices, relationships, and work. But when a person holds the belief, I am not enough, he closes the gates of his soul. The radiation cannot penetrate with full strength. This results in lethargy, dullness, confusion, and spiritual heaviness. Such heaviness is often mistaken for laziness, when in truth it is a blocked soul stream. Where confidence should reside, there is emptiness. Where clarity should shine, there is fog. Where spiritual vitality should pulsate, there is stagnation. Inferiority is therefore not merely emotional, it is radiational poison, a low vibration that repels higher currents. This is why a person with low self-worth struggles to hear his intuition, to feel warmth, or to act with inner conviction. He is temporarily disconnected from the natural flow of the light. Nothing in creation can flourish while cut off from its source. The blockage dissolves when the person embraces the truth. That self-worth is not earned, not borrowed, not given by society, but inherent, because it is anchored in the spiritual core, not earthly conditions. To awaken to this is to remove the veil and allow the light to stream unhindered once more. Chapter 18. Relationship distortions and dependence. Where self-esteem is low, relationships become distorted. Instead of flowing from inner fullness, they are driven by need, fear, or dependence. A person who does not perceive his own worth begins to cling to others in hopes of receiving externally what he lacks internally. This gives rise to excessive compliance, fear of abandonment, tolerating disrespect, emotional dependency, attempts to earn love. In such relationships, the human being cannot express his true nature. He becomes a shadow of himself, suppressing his voice to avoid rejection. He confuses compromise with self-erasure and loyalty with bondage. The Grail Message shows that every relationship must be in balance, a dance of give and take between two spiritually awake individuals. But when one comes from inferiority, balance becomes impossible. Instead of standing as an equal, he stands as a beggar, seeking validation as though it were bread. Inferiority cannot produce true love because it lacks freedom. The person is not truly loving, he is clinging. He is not serving, he is appeasing. He is not connecting, he is compensating. Only when the soul reconnects with its light-originated dignity can relationships become healthy, respectful, and deeply fulfilling. A person who knows his worth does not depend on love, he contributes to it. Chapter 19. Healing, Energy, and Vitality Affected by Self-Rejection. Low self-esteem is not just emotional, it creates physical and energetic consequences within the human being. The Grail Message explains that the radiations of the spirit influence the physical body. When a person rejects himself, the spiritual radiations shrink inward, depriving the body and psyche of their natural vitality. This results in chronic fatigue, lack of enthusiasm, nervous tension, weakened immune resistance, headaches, stomach tightness or chest pressure, sleep disturbances, psychosomatic illnesses. The human body suffers because it is being denied the vital current that should flow from the spirit. Self-rejection creates inner tension, like a tightly closed flower unable to receive sunlight. This is why no amount of physical self-care can heal what is spiritual in origin. The person may rest, eat, exercise, or meditate, yet remains tired, because the root issue lies in the soul's relationship to itself. When a person begins to accept his inherent dignity, the radiations brighten. Vitality returns as warmth spreads once more through the inner organism. The most powerful medicine for fatigue caused by inferiority is not rest, it is truth. Chapter 20. How low self-esteem perpetuates failure and missed opportunities. Inferiority creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The person who believes he is not capable or not worthy unconsciously sabotages himself. He shrinks from opportunities, avoids challenges, and declines responsibilities that would elevate him. In his distorted self-perception, he believes he is protecting himself from failure, yet he is actually guaranteeing it. In creation, radiations respond to inner conviction. A person who feels small attracts small outcomes. A person who feels unworthy repels opportunities meant for him. A person who walks in fear opens the gate for loss. Thus, the life of the one with low self-esteem becomes a cycle. He doubts himself. He avoids action. Opportunities pass by. He feels inferior because he has achieved little. The inferiority deepens, repeating the cycle. Failure is rarely due to lack of ability, more often it is the result of inner shrinking. The Grail Message makes it clear, the light gives to each soul the tools it needs. The moment a human being steps into his task with trust, the radiations align, and assistance flows. But the one who hides from life cannot receive what life offers. To break the cycle, the person must awaken to the truth that he was never inferior, only mistaken. The light awaits his movement. Creation responds to his renewed confidence. The gate opens the moment he takes the first upright step. Part 5. False and misleading ideas about self-worth. Unmasking the illusions that keep humanity enslaved to weakness. Chapter 21. Being modest means devaluing oneself. Humanity has confused modesty with self-neglect, humility with inner collapse, and reserve with fear of shining. In this distortion, many souls walk through life bent over, mentally apologizing for their existence. They believe that to be modest, they must speak quietly, think small, hide their gifts, and shrink so that others may feel comfortable. But in the light of the Grail Message, this is not modesty. It is self-distortion. True modesty is radiational harmony, not self-reduction. It is the quiet strength of a soul that knows its value and has no need to trumpet it. Modesty grows from inner certainty, not insecurity. It is the natural fragrance of a blooming spirit, not the wilted posture of one who fears to be seen. False modesty, however, is a prison. It leads to underestimating talents, refusing opportunities, avoiding responsibilities, silencing inner conviction, allowing others to overshadow one's rightful tasks. Creation does not reward those who shrink. It rewards those who stand upright in the will of the Creator, radiating their gifts without pride and without fear. To devalue oneself is to reject the Creator's work. To stand upright is to honor Him. Thus, genuine modesty is strength without noise, while false modesty is weakness disguised as virtue. Humanity must rise to understand the difference. Chapter 22. Inferiority proves humility. This is one of the greatest spiritual errors of our time. Many believe that feeling inferior is a sign of meekness and spiritual depth. They think a humble person must constantly consider others better, must always feel unworthy, must lower himself and glorify others. But inferiority is not humility. It is a distortion, an unhealthy shrinking of the human spirit caused by fear, doubt, and radiational collapse. True humility is clarity. It is the recognition that all gifts come from the Creator. Every talent must serve. No human is the center of the universe. Strength must remain pure. Power must remain obedient to the light. Humility lifts, it does not push down. Humility aligns, it does not suppress. Humility opens, it does not suffocate. Inferiority, on the other hand, is self-rejection. It blocks movement, creativity, and spiritual growth. It makes a soul unresponsive to higher guidance. Inferiority says, I am nothing. I cannot. Humility says, I am a servant of the light, let me fulfill my task. In inferiority, a soul collapses inward. In humility, a soul stands upright, radiant, and useful. Through this correction, the reader must clearly understand. The Creator never wills that His creatures should walk in inferiority. He wills that they walk in upright humility, strong, pure, and clear. Chapter 23. Self-love is selfishness. This misconception has injured countless souls. Many were taught that loving themselves is sinful, egotistical, or unspiritual. They fear appreciating their gifts, celebrating their growth, or acknowledging their worth. But what is self-love in the light of the Grail Message? It is the healthy recognition of one's spiritual dignity. It is the joy of unfolding the gifts placed within by the Creator. It is valuing the body, the mind, the spirit, the talents, the path, and the earthly life entrusted to one. A person who does not love himself cannot love others. A person who hates himself cannot radiate goodness. A person who rejects himself cannot uplift the world. Selfishness is not self-love. Selfishness is greed, vanity, self-centeredness. A pulling in of radiations that stagnates and suffocates. Self-love is expansive. Selfishness contracts. Self-love is gratitude. Selfishness is hunger. Self-love gives strength. Selfishness drains. Self-love stands in harmony with the will of God. Selfishness stands against it. Thus, self-love is not only permitted, it is required. It is the foundation of a healthy, radiant, upright life. Humanity must learn again to love themselves in a way that honors the Creator and enables them to blossom. Chapter 24. Comparison is necessary for growth. Comparison is one of the most destructive habits of modern humanity. People measure their worth by others, body, wealth, intelligence, success, beauty, gifts. In doing so, they disconnect from their own path and cripple their radiational development. The Grail Message teaches that every soul has a unique vibration, a unique path, and a unique set of abilities. No two are identical. Comparison therefore violates the law of homogeneity and throws the soul into inner misalignment. Comparison produces envy, self-doubt, inferiority, jealousy, anxiety, restlessness, confusion, radiational disturbance. When a soul compares itself with another, it rejects its own task. It abandons the will of the Creator for the illusions of the intellect. Growth comes through self-examination, obedience to spiritual laws, using one's gifts, learning from mistakes, upright striving, serving in one's unique path. Comparison paralyses, striving liberates. Humanity must understand, your path is your own, your measure is within, not around. Chapter 25. Why these misconceptions trap souls in weakness. The misconceptions in this part of the book are not harmless. They are radiational chains. They weaken the spiritual core of the human being and block his natural upward striving. Each false belief acts like a barrier against the inflow of strength from the spiritual world. They bend the soul inward, making it fearful, hesitant, and small. And in such a state, the soul becomes vulnerable to manipulation, control, exploitation, and despair. These errors trap souls because they twist noble qualities into harmful distortions. Replace clarity with confusion. Replace strength with weakness. Replace humility with inferiority. Replace love with fear. Replace individuality with conformity. Replace spiritual truth with human opinions. And through these distortions, the soul can no longer hear the quiet guidance of its inner voice. These misconceptions are not merely psychological, they are radiational disturbances. They interfere with the soul's ability to receive pure impressions from the light. To escape low self-esteem and inferiority complex, humanity must first unlearn these lies. Only then can the soul stand upright again, returning to its natural clarity and dignity. Part 6. The Inner Work of Developing True Self-Worth. A Grail-inspired path to restoring the soul's radiance. Chapter 26. Awakening the soul's awareness of its true value. Every human being enters creation with an inherent worth that does not need to be earned, justified, proven, or defended. This worth is not psychological but spiritual. It is woven into the radiations of the spirit itself. It is the natural dignity that arises from being a creature of the light, called to give, to serve, to refine, and to mature. Yet most human beings live unaware of this value. They seek validation from other humans, who are themselves spiritually asleep. They hunger for external approval because the inner flame is dim. But the soul's value does not depend on applause, achievements, or recognition. It depends solely on its alignment with the laws of creation. When a person awakens spiritually, they begin to perceive their true worth, not as ego, but as responsibility. True self-esteem is not pride, it is reverent awareness of being entrusted with a fragment of spiritual power. It is the realization that you must grow, you must rise, you must unfold, because your existence is not a mistake but a calling. The Grail Message teaches that everything in creation moves upward through active striving. Your value becomes visible the moment you begin to strive. It shines through your deeds, your purity, your clarity, and your courage. Awakening your self-worth begins the moment you stop asking the world who you are, and begin listening to the quiet truth within. Chapter 27. Radiational Purification. Cleansing negative self-perception. Low self-esteem is not simply a psychological problem, it is a radiational contamination. It arises when wrong thoughts, fears, and darkened emotions cling to the soul like dust on a lamp. These foreign radiations distort the natural feeling of dignity. They dim the inner clarity and pull the human being downward. Radiational purification, therefore, is the first and most essential step in healing self-worth. Purification happens through three processes. 1. Recognizing the origin of negative thoughts. Most feelings of inferiority did not arise from within. They were absorbed from parents, teachers, peers, culture, religion, and society. The soul mistakes these external impressions as truth. But through awakening, it learns to separate what was imposed from what is real. 2. Bringing everything into the light of truth. Everything false begins to wither under the light. The moment you expose your beliefs to truth, your fear, doubt, shame, and insecurity lose their power. They cannot survive clarity. 3. Aligning your radiations with purity. Purity is not moral rigidity, it is spiritual cleanliness. When the soul seeks purity, wrong images dissolve. Old emotional wounds loosen their grip. The inner atmosphere becomes lighter. Radiational purification is not achieved through affirmation, positive thinking, or human techniques. It is achieved through sincere striving for clarity, truth, and moral upliftment. As you become inwardly pure, you naturally begin to feel worthy again, not because someone told you so, but because your soul finally breathes freely. Chapter 28. Recognizing and releasing false beliefs about oneself. False beliefs are shackles around the soul. They are invisible chains that dictate how a person feels, thinks, behaves, and dreams. To break free from inferiority, one must identify and discard these inner lies. Common false beliefs include: I am not good enough. Others are better than I am. My worth depends on my achievements. If people reject me, I must be worthless. I have no talents. I don't deserve good things. I am small and insignificant. None of these beliefs could ever come from the spirit. They arise only when the intellect rules. The intellect compares, measures, labels, and diminishes. It sees the human being only from the outside, never from the radiational core. To release false beliefs. Step 1. Identify the lie. You cannot uproot what you cannot see. Step 2. Trace its origin. Ask: who planted this idea in me? Why did I accept it? Step 3. Expose it to truth. What does the light say about this belief? What do the laws of creation reveal? Nothing untrue survives the light. Step 4. Replace the lie with reality. Not with flattery or ego, but with truth. I have value because I can give. I can serve. I can grow. I can rise. The soul gains strength as the lies fall away. It stands upright again, naturally, quietly, without effort. Chapter 29. The Discipline of Thought and Imagination in Building Self-Esteem. Your thoughts shape your radiations. Your imagination forms the images that magnetize your experiences. Every feeling of inferiority begins as an undisciplined thought or a distorted inner picture. If your thinking is dark, your radiations darken. If your imagination paints failure, your life bends toward failure. If your inner images shrink, your spirit cannot unfold. Self-esteem requires the discipline of thought and imagination. 1. Thought discipline. Thoughts must be trained like a wild horse. Without guidance they run into fear, comparison, and self-attack. The laws of creation respond to form, not intention. If you think yourself small, you radiate smallness. True thought discipline means rejecting self-condemning thoughts, refusing comparison, thinking objectively, clearly, truthfully, focusing on what strengthens rather than weakens. A disciplined thinker rises, a chaotic thinker sinks. 2. Imagination discipline. Imagination is a spiritual tool. It shapes forms in the fine material spheres that later condense into earthly experience. Inferiority creates images of failure, rejection, humiliation, limitation. These images attract corresponding conditions. To heal, one must paint new inner pictures. Clarity, dignity, capability, purpose, success through effort, growth. Not fantasies, but truthful images aligned with the laws of movement and reciprocal action. When thoughts and imagination align with truth, confidence awakens naturally, because the soul begins to radiate in harmony once again. Chapter 30. Aligning with the laws of creation to reclaim inner power. Inferiority is always a sign of misalignment. When the human being lives contrary to the laws of creation, he loses inner strength. He sinks in vitality, courage, confidence, and clarity. To reclaim inner power, one must consciously align with the laws. 1. The law of movement. The spirit must strive, act, give, grow. Stagnation breeds inferiority. 2. The law of attraction of homogeneous species. You attract what resembles your inner state. If you radiate insecurity, insecure circumstances surround you. If you radiate clarity, clarity returns to you. 3. The law of reciprocal action. Every thought, word, and deed returns amplified. Low self-esteem is often the harvest of long-standing wrong inner activity. 4. The law of gravity, spiritual. Heavy thoughts pull you downward. Uplifting thoughts elevate your soul. 5. The law of purity. The purer your inner life, the lighter your radiations. The lighter your radiations, the stronger your inner power. To align with these laws is to return to the right orbit of life. Inferiority withers because it cannot survive in the light-filled environment of obedience to creation's structure. When a human being stands in the will of the Creator, he becomes strong, not through pride, but through clarity. Not through ego, but through truth. Not through pretense, but through spiritual fitness. Part 7. Living as a spiritually secure individual. The state of a soul freed from inferiority and anchored in truth. Chapter 31. Walking with clarity, dignity, and uprightness. The human being who has awakened to his true value stands differently in creation. His inner posture changes long before his outward actions do. Clarity begins to radiate from him like a soft yet unmistakable light. He is no longer tossed about by the opinions, moods, and expectations of others, because his foundation now rests upon the will of the Creator, not the shifting sands of human approval. Clarity is not merely knowing who you are, it is knowing what you are within the laws of creation, an independent spiritual being endowed with a unique wavelength and purpose. When this recognition dawns, it becomes impossible to belittle oneself. Inferiority dissolves because you realize that every spirit is meant to unfold, not to shrink. Dignity naturally follows. True dignity is not pride, thick self-importance, or loud display. It is the quiet bearing that comes from inner truthfulness, an uprightness that allows no deceit, no hidden intention, no crawling for acceptance. The Grail Message teaches that dignity is inseparable from purity. You stand tall because your inner life is clean. You act with certainty because you have nothing to hide. Uprightness crowns these qualities. Uprightness is the soul's natural alignment with the light. It strengthens the will to act correctly even when no one sees. It frees you from the compulsion to impress, please, or compete. One who walks uprightly becomes unshakable. A spiritually secure human being moves forward with clarity of purpose, dignity of bearing, and uprightness of soul, free from the chains of inferiority, untouched by the illusions of comparison. This is the first step into true freedom. Chapter 32. Building authentic relationships without inferiority. Inferiority distorts relationships. It creates dependence, jealousy, fear of abandonment, overpleasing, false humility, silent resentment, and emotional instability. It stains human interaction because the individual approaches others not as a complete being but as one secretly begging for validation. Authentic relationships begin only when a person stands firm in who they are. A spiritually secure individual does not enter relationships to fill a void. They enter as a giver, not a beggar. They bring their radiance, clarity, strength, and goodwill. This changes everything. No manipulation is needed. No fear-driven clinging. No need to hide one's weaknesses or exaggerate strengths. No comparison, because each soul is recognized as a unique creation with a different path. Such a person listens without defensiveness, speaks without fear, loves without desperation, and corrects without cruelty. Their presence uplifts because it is stable. Their boundaries are firm yet loving. Where inferiority once created chains, spiritual security creates freedom. In such relationships, loyalty grows naturally. Respect flows easily. Communication becomes honest. Love becomes pure, not poisoned by insecurity. Friendship becomes a meeting of strengths, not a mutual hiding of weaknesses. Authentic relationships arise only when each person brings inner solidity, not the trembling need to be validated, but the steady radiance of a soul aligned with the light. Chapter 33. Overcoming envy and the need for approval. Envy is the silent confession of inferiority. It arises only when a person feels small, unseen, or inadequate. In truth, envy is never about another person's success, it is about your own lack of inner grounding. The Grail Message reveals the radiational law. Every spirit blossoms differently according to its nature. No two human beings have the same task, path, radiational field, or spiritual assignment. Therefore, comparison is irrational, envy is rebellion against the natural order. When the individual recognizes this, envy withers. You discover that another person's blessing does not diminish your own. Their light does not dim yours. Their success is not a threat but a sign of what is possible when one aligns with the will of God. The need for approval dissolves as well. Approval seeking is rooted in fear, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of being nothing. But the spiritually secure person stands firmly in his God-given identity. He understands that truth recognizes itself. Those who resonate with him will draw near naturally, those who do not are not meant for his path. No more bending backwards to be liked. No more lowering standards to be accepted. No more performing to earn praise. No more shrinking to avoid criticism. When you overcome envy and approval seeking, you reclaim your radiational freedom. You stop draining your energy outward and begin directing it to your true purpose. What once felt like chains now becomes open sky. Chapter 34. The Inner Radiation of a Self-Assured Soul. A human being with true self-esteem radiates differently. The change is not emotional or psychological, it is spiritual. The core of his being emits a higher, clearer vibration. This radiation is unmistakable. Such a soul walks with quiet strength, speaks with calm authority, acts without hesitation, is not intimidated by the success of others, does not need to prove anything, does not bow to trends or peer pressure, does not collapse under criticism. The radiational field of a self-assured person is stable. It communicates confidence without arrogance, humility without inferiority, love without neediness, and boldness without aggression. This radiation also repels what is unhealthy. It naturally pushes away manipulators, emotional parasites, toxic relationships, degrading environments, and anything that vibrates below truth. The person does not even need to fight, the radiations do the work. Just as darkness cannot remain in the presence of light, insecurity cannot remain in the presence of genuine self-assurance. Spiritual self-esteem, grounded in the will of the Creator, creates a protective atmosphere around the individual. It draws the right people, the right opportunities, and the right experiences into their life. It is a magnet for harmony, because harmony is now the natural expression of their inner state. Chapter 35. The Freedom of Acting from Truth, Not Fear. Fear is the prison of the soul. Inferiority is one of its strongest bars. People live small, dream small, act small, and speak small because they are afraid. Afraid to fail, afraid to be seen, afraid to be rejected, afraid to succeed, afraid to stand out, afraid to be criticized, afraid to be different. But fear is powerless in the presence of truth. When a human being awakens spiritually, they begin to act from truth, not fear. Decisions no longer come from insecurity or anxious calculation but from inner clarity. Actions flow naturally. Speech becomes bold and clean. Choices become purposeful and decisive. The person becomes free. They can walk away from what does not honor them. They can speak their mind without trembling. They can pursue their calling without apology. They can set boundaries without guilt. They can say yes and no with equal strength. Most importantly, they stop living as a reaction to others and start living as an expression of who they truly are. Acting from truth means aligning every thought, word and deed with the laws of creation. It is the highest form of freedom because it is the state of inner harmony with the light. When inferiority dissolves, the human spirit rises, and for the first time, it lives. Part 8. Practical Pathways and Exercises. Concrete Steps for Reshaping Self-Worth in Harmony with the Laws of Creation. Chapter 36. Self-Reflective Exercises for Inner Clarity. True self-esteem does not begin with loud declarations, external achievements, or the approval of others. It begins quietly, within. The journey back to healthy self-worth requires an honest confrontation with oneself, illuminated by the light of truth. Through self-reflection, the human being is offered a chance to finally see the false shadows he has carried, and to separate them from what is genuinely his. Self-reflection is not intellectual self-examination. It is a spiritual turning inward. It requires stillness, a state where the noisy intellect falls silent and the inner voice of the spirit can finally speak. In this silence, the first sparks of clarity arise. Why do I feel inferior? When did I begin measuring myself by false standards? What lies am I still holding about myself? These exercises serve as mirrors. They reveal one's radiational wounds, long buried but still active. The Grail Message teaches that everything unexamined remains influential. It continues acting within the human being. Therefore, the sincere seeker must look directly, calmly, and truthfully at the roots of his self-rejection. One exercise is simple but powerful. Sit quietly and observe your reactions to compliments, criticism, and comparison. Do you shrink inward? Do you feel undeserving? Do you tense up? These reactions reveal hidden convictions that shape your self-worth. Another exercise is to write down every negative belief you hold about yourself, without filtering. Then, beside each one, ask, would this belief stand before the light of truth? Is this how the Creator sees me? Immediately the falsehood becomes visible. Self-reflection clears the fog that inferiority builds. It opens the door to freedom. Chapter 37. Radiational Techniques to Strengthen the Soul. The human being is constantly radiating and absorbing. His inner condition determines what he attracts, repels, or amplifies. Low self-esteem weakens one's radiational field, making the soul vulnerable to fear, comparison, anxiety, and spiritual exhaustion. To rise above inferiority, one must strengthen the radiations of conviction, clarity, and purity. Radiational strengthening is not mysticism. It is simply the deliberate alignment of the inner life with creation's natural laws. One such technique is upright breathing, deep, calm breaths combined with the conscious intention of releasing inner heaviness. With every exhale, imagine letting go of fear, shame, and false beliefs. With every inhale, receive strength, clarity, and dignity. Another technique is radiational stillness, sitting quietly while visualizing yourself standing upright before the light, letting every unworthy thought melt away. This draws the soul upward, loosens the grip of heaviness, and strengthens the will. The strongest radiational practice, however, is gratitude. Gratitude lifts the soul instantly, reconnecting it with the stream of blessing. A grateful person cannot remain inferior. His radiations become bright, healthy, and expansive. Through these techniques, the soul gradually regains its natural power, its rightful strength within creation. Chapter 38. Affirmation and Visualization Aligned with Creation's Laws. The human spirit shapes its path through the power of living pictures, images formed through thought and imagination. When these images align with the laws of creation, they become seeds that must bring corresponding fruits. When they contradict these laws, they create distortion, confusion, and self-diminishment. Inferiority complex often arises from unconscious visualizations, seeing oneself as inadequate, incapable, or unwanted. These inner pictures radiate outward, attracting confirming experiences. The human being unknowingly participates in his own stagnation. To reverse this, one must intentionally create images that correspond with truth, not fantasy, not ego, but spiritual reality. Visualize yourself standing upright, honest, capable of blessing those around you. Visualize walking into a room without shrinking inward. Visualize acting boldly where you previously hesitated. Affirmations must also reflect the laws of creation. Saying, "I am the greatest," is false and leads to arrogance. But saying, "I am a creation of God, endowed with purpose, strength, and dignity," aligns with truth. Such affirmations nourish the soul and dissolve inferiority. Correct visualization is not escapism, it is cooperation with the light. It is the restoration of the correct inner picture of who the human being truly is. Chapter 39. Releasing the Inner Critic. Within many people, there lives a harsh voice, relentless, unforgiving, and often cruel. This inner critic is not the conscience. It is a distorted creation of the intellect, shaped by past wounds, criticisms, societal expectations, and false judgments from others. The inner critic is one of the strongest engines of inferiority complex. It magnifies mistakes, mocks effort, and dismisses success. It whispers that others are better, stronger, smarter, more deserving. It keeps the human spirit in chains. The Grail Message clarifies that the conscience speaks quietly, clearly, and objectively. The inner critic, however, speaks loudly and destructively. To silence it, one must first recognize it as foreign, an accumulation of wrong impressions, not the voice of the spirit. Observe its tone. Does it belittle, insult, or shame you? Then it is not truth. Observe its effect. Does it weaken your will? Then it must be rejected. One effective method is writing down everything the inner critic says, and then responding to it with truth. Another is speaking aloud. This thought is not mine. This breaks its radiational grip. Releasing the inner critic restores inner space for dignity, confidence, and healthy self-respect to emerge. Chapter 40. Sustaining Spiritual Self-Esteem in Daily Life. Self-worth is not built once, it is maintained continuously. Human radiations fluctuate based on thoughts, feelings, choices, associations, and internal discipline. Therefore, sustaining healthy self-esteem requires daily spiritual vigilance. The human being must guard his inner life from pollution, negative company, destructive media, corrupt values, envious peers, and environments that weaken the spirit. Every exposure leaves impressions, and impressions influence radiational strength. The daily practices that sustain true self-worth include speaking truthfully, not diminishing oneself to please others, associating with uplifting individuals, working diligently, for effort strengthens inner conviction, keeping promises to oneself, which builds integrity, avoiding comparison, which drains spiritual strength, choosing purity in thought and action, which magnifies inner peace. Above all, sustaining self-esteem requires constant remembrance of one's origin. The human spirit did not come from the world, therefore the world cannot determine its value. It came from the Creator, noble, radiant, capable of contributing to the harmony of creation. Living from this truth daily ensures that inferiority can never again take root. Conclusion. Returning to the clarity of true self-worth. Humanity stands today at the crossroads between two paths: the path of inner truth, which leads to dignity, clarity, and spiritual maturity, and the path of self-distortion, which leads to inferiority, confusion, emotional bondage, and radiational weakening. For centuries, human beings have misinterpreted the meaning of self-worth, seeking validation in everything except the one place where it truly arises, the inner spiritual core. Low self-esteem is not merely a psychological condition, it is a radiational deviation, a distancing of the human soul from the purity of its origin and the harmony of the laws of creation. Inferiority complex is not merely feeling less than others, it is a condition in which the spiritual flame within the human being becomes covered, dimmed, or forgotten. The Grail Message teaches that every human spirit is endowed with value, purpose, and the ability to develop into full luminosity. No soul is created inferior. Inferiority arises only when a person fails to use, fails to recognize, or fails to activate the gifts given by the Creator. This book has aimed to shine a clear, uncompromising light on what self-worth truly is, how inferiority originates, the societal, emotional, and spiritual forces that shape it, the errors and misconceptions that deepen it, the consequences of living disconnected from one's inner dignity, and most importantly, the path to liberation, healing, and rebirth of true confidence. The time has come for human beings to stand upright again, inwardly and outwardly. The age of self-hate, insecurity, inferiority, and emotional paralysis must end. True self-esteem shines forth only when a person aligns his inner life with truth, purity, simplicity, dignity, responsibility, and the inviolable laws of creation. The goal is not arrogance, nor ego, nor pride. These are distortions. The goal is clarity, to know who you are, why you are here, and what you must become. When a human being stands in truth, inferiority cannot exist. When the soul reconnects with its origin, insecurity dissolves. When one acts from inner conviction, the fear of man collapses. And when the inner worth is awakened, the human being finally becomes what the Creator intended: a luminous, confident, noble, and spiritually awake personality. This is the call of this book. Rise. Remember. Awaken. Become. For your worth does not come from men, but from the light. Epilogue. The coming purification and the restoration of true human value. Humanity is rapidly approaching a time when all that is false, weak, pretentious, or impure will be swept away. The world can no longer sustain the radiational heaviness produced by insecurity, envy, inferiority, self-rejection, and emotional dependence. These states clog the human soul, distort perception, and block the natural flow of spiritual power. In the coming purification, every human being will be confronted with himself. All masks will fall, all pretense will collapse, all external sources of validation will crumble. Men will stand before the light of truth with only what they are, not what they pretended to be. In this process, inferiority will be burned away through the pressure of clarity. False humility will be exposed as weakness. Ego-based superiority will be shattered. Emotional dependencies will dissolve. The inner critic will be silenced by the unyielding light. Only authentic, matured, luminous human beings will remain standing. This purification is not punishment. It is restoration. Creation seeks balance, and anything that distorts the true radiational state of the human spirit must fall away. What will emerge is a new humanity, men and women who know their worth, respect the worth of others, stand in dignity, think clearly, act with confidence, radiate purity, and fulfill the purpose of their existence. The future belongs to those who master themselves, not those who seek validation from others. Inferiority and low self-esteem, as known today, will not survive the coming age. For such conditions cannot withstand the pure radiations of truth. The question is simple. Will you rise with the light, or collapse with the shadows? The choice is yours. The moment is now. Appendix. Practical exercises, reflections, and radiational techniques. The following tools are given to support the inner work required to break free from inferiority and awaken true self-worth. They should be practiced consistently, calmly, and sincerely. Their power lies not in complexity but in radiational alignment. 1. Self-reflection exercises. Exercise A. The mirror of truth. Sit quietly. Ask yourself, what false beliefs do I hold about myself? Who told me these lies? What does the light say about me? Write the answers immediately, without filtering. Exercise B. The 3 pillars of my value. Reflect on and write. What I am, qualities of character. What I can become, undeveloped potentials. What I must leave behind, old patterns. This reveals radiational blockages. 2. Radiational techniques. Technique A. The purification breath. Slow breath in, right pointing arrow, imagine light entering the chest. Slow breath out, right pointing arrow, imagine heaviness leaving the soul. Repeat for 5 minutes. Technique B. The upright posture. Stand or sit straight. This posture aligns your inner radiational currents automatically. Inferiority cannot radiationally coexist with uprightness. Technique C. Inner silence. Spend 3 to 5 minutes daily in stillness. During this period, the true self can rise. 3. Affirmations aligned with creation's laws. Repeat calmly, truthfully. I am a creation of light, therefore, I possess worth. I walk in dignity, clarity, and responsibility. What the Creator placed within me is enough. I rise above fear and false comparison. My confidence comes from my spirit, not from men. 4. Visualization practices. The radiant flame. Imagine a small flame inside your chest. Each day, visualize it growing brighter. This awakens the spiritual consciousness of worth. 5. Daily practices to sustain true self-esteem. Keep your environment orderly, chaos weakens radiations. Speak truthfully, lies create inner distortion. Keep promises to yourself, this builds trust in your own soul. Avoid envy-inducing environments, protect your radiations. Practice upright work, effort strengthens inner value.